Welcome to our weekly maritime vlog. I'm Corey Ranslam with International Maritime Security Associates. We have the #1 producer, Bennett, behind the camera, who's running the show. You guys seem to love him because he gets more comments than anybody. We also have Mr. B here on the floor making sure we stay on track. Today, we're going to discuss the marine protected areas. Occasionally on the vlog, we talk about different international treaties and different international regulations. In past, we've covered and talked about the UN's Convention of the Law at Sea. So a topic has come up recently within the participants of the UN High Seas Treaty, where they're talking about marine protected areas and how do we look at actually protecting these marine protected areas from around the world. So let's step back a little bit and put a little bit of definition behind what we're talking about. Marine protected areas exist in different shapes and in different forms in countries and the oceans around the world. Some of them are internal to a country, some are external as far as in the territorial seas or in the exclusive economic zone. There's other marine protected areas that are covered in international waters in certain places like Antarctica. And what a marine protected area means, and again, there's a little bit of a varying definition depending on where you are, but a marine protected area is an area where there's a law or a regulation or a rule that regulates the human activity within that certain area. So, for instance, there's certain marine protected areas around the world where you can't fish. There's certain marine protected areas around the world where you can't dig or drill or kind of mine any natural resources. There's certain marine protected areas where you can't swim or dive. There's certain marine protected areas where you have to go at certain speeds or stay a certain distance offshore. So there's a plethora of these different types of areas around the world, and usually the marine protected areas are pretty well designated when you look at the nautical chart. So if you're a mariner, you've come in contact probably at some point in your career with these marine protected areas. So getting back to the UN side of it, and this seems to be led by the country of South Africa. South Africa, along with some of the other participants from the UN High Seas Treaty, have been talking about how you can look at kind of a global enforcement mechanism for marine protected areas. Now, there's a lot of issues through the IMO, but also the greater United Nations that really need to be addressed when you look at, hey, how do we put together some type of a global enforcement scheme for a marine protected area? It's really difficult to do. There's different climate treaties, there's different global treaties, there's all kinds of different operating agreements between countries, and it's really difficult when you look at some kind of an enforcement mechanism when you're talking about a marine protected area. And let me kind of give you an example from a maritime perspective that you all may understand. Piracy by international law is obviously illegal. When we saw piracy flare up off the coast of Africa back in the 2008 to 2009 timeframe, a lot of the piracy that took place, some of it was inside the territorial seas of Somalia, but a lot of it that took place was in international waters. So it's illegal under international law, but who has jurisdiction to be able to enforce that? So if you look from a jurisdictional standpoint in that particular regard, typically in international waters, the flag state has primary jurisdiction, but not every flag state has the ability to carry out enforcement of that action. And also, if you looked at Somalia, there's no really kind of strong government or enforcement mechanism. Even though we know these people came out of Somalia and some of the surrounding areas, there was no enforcement mechanism in Somalia to be able to take care of this problem. So there's no enforcement in there. So in a lot of cases, the world community, the United States, the EU, and China were kind of the three primary countries that were involved in this, in the piracy side of it, stepped up along with Kenya to enforce this international piracy problem. And in some cases actually went through the court system and did very well. There were some cases because of jurisdictional issues that did not do so well. So if we take this to the maritime protected areas, one of the issues that we really have to look at to try to overcome is how does the enforcement of this work if it falls outside the territorial seas of a country, or it falls inside the territorial seas of a country that doesn't have a mechanism in place for enforcement. So the countries that were a part of this UN High Seas Treaty kind of came up with three basic questions in a statement of focus that they feel is kind of the beginning of the direction that this would need to go. This is going to take a lot of time and a lot of really kind of thinking through how this would work. Where is this kind of marine protected area enforcement going to reside? Most likely it'll probably reside as an addendum or an add-on to the UN's Convention of the Law at Seas, and that's kind of why I mentioned that at the beginning, because that would be the most likely place. So here's the kind of the three questions/statements that they came up with in this first meeting talking about these global marine protected areas. Number one, we really need to define a process to identify, designate, manage, and enforce a global network of MPAs. That's going to be really difficult to be able to do. Number two, we have to create a mechanism for a global monitoring and surveillance of the MPAs. That as well is going to be difficult to do. And then the third is to create a mechanism for kind of addressing non-compliance, which gets into the enforcement issue. So there's a lot that still needs to be done. What the UN is doing is going to look at for the next couple of years is to start to look at some of these issues. It's going to be kind of almost a 2-year series of intergovernmental meetings to be able to look at these marine protected areas. In a lot of places, these marine protected areas are extremely important to the local economy. And if you look at certain areas of the world where countries don't have the ability to be able to protect a particular fishing area or a marine protected area within the territorial seas of their country, there's fishermen who actually come in from other countries and who will overfish those areas. That's some of the beginnings of the problems that would happen off the coast of Somalia is fishermen from other countries around the world came in and started to overfish the Somali waters, and with that put the Somali fishermen out of business, and it went into piracy. Obviously there was a number of other issues there, but we've seen it not just off the coast of Somalia, but in other parts of the world. So there's a lot of difficult questions that the world and the member states of the IMO, along with the United Nations, will have to come together to really answer some difficult questions on how do we do this, how do we surveil this, how do we enforce it, and then what do we do with non-compliance and where does that rest? Hey, thanks for joining us this week. We appreciate all the viewers, and if you've stuck around this long and you've watched the video, you should hit that subscribe button because that means you like the content we're putting out, and if you subscribe, you get notified when we put out a new video. Also, make sure you connect to us through our social media, detailed in the banner above and also in the comments section below. That's one way to ask questions, suggest topics, but also just dial into the conversation that we want to have with you guys. Make sure you hit the like button for all the videos we like so we know what kind of content you guys like so we can put more out in those particular topic areas. If you have any questions where it comes to maritime security, maritime risk management, or maritime regulatory compliance, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We have a number of phenomenal experts here at IMSA who are happy to help you out because we always want to make sure we steer you in the right direction.